Well, it's been a long time since we've been here on set, and here we are midway through the 2021 season. We had a fun spring season, quickly transitioned into the fall season. Obviously, we haven't been doing very many podcasts this fall season due to extracurricular things, which also include the big mix of Friday and Saturday games leaves us without a lot of time to be able to produce our videos. But at the same token, we've been able to take in the games, take a look at and see how the rest of the state is comparing to our mighty NUIC, along with the eight-man game as well, and seeing where a lot of our teams are picking up the pace in that spectrum as well. We have some interesting storylines that we'll gravitate to in Class 2A and Class 3A as we start to see the playoff outlooks from IHSA come out. This week we'll be presenting our own version of our playoff projections. And I know that Steve Soucy's also been putting out his projections on a regular basis here recently as well. So we have a lot to look forward to, but so far it's been a fun start to the season.
It's been really interesting to see how, with the short COVID season, what we portrayed and thought that, this was going to give us a better grasp for the fall. It's been interesting to see whether or not that actually, dictated itself as true.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good drop in there because we have a lot of things that we thought would be able to carry over into the fall season. Some of those have held true. Some teams are better than what we thought that they would be coming into the fall, and some teams have digressed a little bit as well.
Well, and on that note, we had teams go from 11-man to 8-man as well, so then that just further, threw itself in the mix.
Yep, exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you our version of the mid-season review, and we're going to start with 8-man, go to 1A, Class 2A, and Class 3A, and wrap it up from there. Well, we're going to start with 8-man, and obviously the 8-man season has gone to fruition for the most part. We have seen quite a few teams within the 8-man ranks have to forfeit games due to either injury or COVID-related reasons, which has not been well. And we've also seen one team have to forfeit a win due to the use of an ineligible player. So it kind of shakes things up. But what we have seen is we have definitely seen where the top 10 teams are as far as 8-man football is concerned. And to me, these are the top 10 teams that you're going to be looking at once we get into the playoffs. Obviously, the playoffs in 8-man are a little bit different than what we are used to in 11-man, but we'll go through and answer some of these questions that Carrie's going to present, along with other areas where questions have been risen up or have arose over the course of the season as well.
Sounds good. I do want to say, though, you talk about this interesting mix of COVID and everything. I know West Central specifically, they've had a whole lot of players out due to COVID concerns, and it's been amazing to see how that really does, shake up the spectrum, kind of like you said, and see how that affects these top 10 teams or, all teams in general. But kicking right off into it, how does the NUIC fit into the 8-man picture?
Well, I think the NUIC is right where we thought that they would be. You had Orangeville, Milledgeville, Acquin, Amboy, and AFC all move over to 8-man this year. Obviously, Polo and River Ridge were already there. And what we've seen so far is the dominance of these teams. Orangeville is undefeated at 5-0. Acquin's 4-1. Polo's 5-0, although they've had to, 2 of their wins are forfeit wins due to the COVID concerns against some pretty good opponents that they would have faced, like Flanagan Cornell Woodland, who's ranked in the top 10. And then Milledgeville is 4-1 as well. And Amboy just fell to 2-3 here this past week with a loss to Milford Cisna Park, who earlier in the year also was facing some COVID issues. So they haven't gotten off to the start they have, either. But I feel that the NUIC contingent's definitely earned its place among the elite of the 8-man ranks, and you're starting to see the media personnel around the state take notice as well.
You know, that goes right into your next question. Who presents the biggest challenge for the NUIC?
I think the biggest challenge right now is St. Thomas More out of Champaign. They have a running back that is being looked at by the University of Illinois, which is excellent to see, especially for 8-man football. But at the same token, they've also were the team that has provided Orangeville with their toughest test outside of Orangeville's game with Aquin. So I feel that St. Thomas More is definitely the #1 contender against the NUIC right now. I think a healthy West Central team, once they get players back and whatnot, would be another team that the NUIC needs to be concerned about. We've seen them against 2 NUIC opponents already in the past 2 weeks. Both of them blowout wins for the NUIC. However, when you're missing 4 to 5 starters in those contests, especially playing at 8-man, that definitely derails you from what you're really bringing forward in a game matchup setting. So another team would be Martinsville. And then we haven't seen a whole lot of games with Decatur Lutheran because they've had to take the forfeit L's as well. But I think Decatur Lutheran would be another team to watch out for.
So out of our NUIC teams, who do you see going furthest in the playoffs?
Well,
or
right
who do
now,
you like for playoffs? I guess I should even ask it that way.
Sure. I mean, right now it's really going to depend on how the seedings take place. But I really like Orangeville right now as the #1 team. I think they have proven it through the first 5 weeks, especially when you take a look at their schedule. They've beat a St. Thomas More team that we've had ranked #5 in our state rankings. They beat an Aquin team who was recently still ranked #3 in our state rankings. And I think, taking a look at what they have to come, they just bring a different value to the game that other teams don't match up with very well. So I think that they would be the top team to look at. But I wouldn't be so sure to count out an Aquin, a Milledgeville, and a Polo. I mean, we haven't seen Polo play in 2 weeks, like we stated, but they're still a very formidable team. They beat Milledgeville in week 1, and heading into week 6, we get that big matchup where Aquin and Milledgeville face off, and that'll give us an even better testament of where Milledgeville and Polo rank when we take a look at comparing them to Orangeville and Aquin until everybody actually meets up with each other.
At the beginning of that last question, you made the comment about how the playoffs are seeded. Do you want to go into that? Do you know that?
Yeah. So the playoff seedings in 8-man football are what everybody in regular IHSA football would love to have. They're seeded 1 through 16. So the likelihood of an all NUIC state championship could be possible if everything shakes out that way, and you got all these different teams all over different parts of the bracket. And that's why I say, some of these teams, they could end up meeting up in the quarterfinals or semifinals before they reach state if they happen to be on the same side of that bracket. So really, if you think about it, being that there's only 24 teams in 8-man, 16 make it to the playoffs, there's only 4 rounds in the playoffs. So you're starting in the second round is your first round matchups, and then you have your quarterfinals, semifinals, and state. So depending on how everything shakes out is what we're going to see some of these teams fall. And obviously this week when we do our projections, we'll get a better gauge of where these teams are going to land.
With the second round being the quarterfinals, who are you expecting to see?
I definitely expect to see our top 4 in the NUIC be there in Orangeville, Polo, Aquin, and Milledgeville. I would not be surprised if we do see a 2 and 3 Amboy get into there because their losses are good losses. They're not bad losses. They haven't lost to anybody that they shouldn't have lost to, and they beat everybody that they should. And this last week they lost to Milford Cisna Park, a game that they probably could have won, a game that they had a big lead in the fourth quarter. But give credit to the Bearcats. They battled back in that one. I really like some teams that we've already mentioned as well being there. Martinsville, St. Thomas More, Decatur Lutheran, and West Central. And, you know, another team that isn't getting a lot of publicity that could potentially be there is Pawnee as well. They're 4-1 on the year. And I think that they'll make a good run at some items as well. So that gives us a look at what we see as far as 8-man goes, and what we get to look forward to as we get closer to the playoffs. Obviously, we're in that fun stretch where we got 4 weeks left of the regular season, so we're going to start seeing a clearer picture of where the playoff scenario takes us. Next up, we move over to Class 1A, where the majority of our class representatives are on the NUIC side of the 11-man playoff outlook. And taking a look there, obviously we have a perennial front runner in Lena Winslow as our lone undefeated team left in the area. And as you can see, we got some good teams coming up behind them with Forreston and Fulton. Galena obviously took a loss to Forreston this week to fall to 2-3, giving them an outside look in to the playoff outlook at the current moment. But I think that we can be pretty sure to expect Galena in the playoffs, provided everything plays out right on their schedule.
Speaking of Lena Winslow, we have 3 unbeaten teams in 1A. Can anyone dethrone Lena Winslow?
Right now, the way that everything is looking across Class 1A, I honestly don't see anybody that can come close to taking Lena Winslow off their game, barring Lena Winslow staying healthy. Obviously, injuries can happen at any time. Doesn't matter who you're playing. COVID could jump out at us at any time. So there's a lot of variables that can really play into where everything shifts. But if everything stays status quo for what Lena Winslow has going on right now, I find it very hard to see anybody in Class 1A coming close to them. Now, there is the unlikely possibility, provided teams getting in the playoffs and that cut line moving up, that we could potentially see Immaculate Conception, who has an enrollment of 323, dropping into Class 1A. I don't think it'll happen, but we're not that far off the cusp of having that happen either if other teams start dropping out and they don't have the qualifications to get into the playoffs. If that were to be the case, then we would be looking at a different scenario. But as of right now, Lena Winslow is number 1 decisively, and it's theirs to lose at the moment.
Speaking of Lena Winslow, Forreston has 1 loss to UPEC. Lena Winslow and Forreston will be playing in week 9. How do you see that going?
Well, right now you take a look at some common opponents, and you take a look at where they stack up, and obviously Forreston lost to Dupec. Their loss was 28-0. But you take a look at who they beat. They have not played Fulton yet. They did just beat Galena in a big way, which Galena lost to Lena Winslow 20-0. Forreston beat them 52-20. So when you start comparing scores, you can kind of run into problems, but at the same time, it's really your best guess of what you expect to see when those two teams meet up. At the current moment, having seen both teams play, I feel that Lena Winslow does have the edge over Forreston. But that'll be an exciting Week 9 matchup, as those two teams have really created a rivalry with each other over the last 6-7 years. So it'll be fun to see.
So we're talking about Galena. Galena is now 2-3. What do their playoff chances look like?
Well, in a normal year, they probably would look a little bleak. But with the possibility of 4 and 5s actually making the playoffs this year, I think Galena has a very good shot of being in regardless of their final record, which I feel at this moment they're going to finish at 5 and 4. When you take a look at what they have left on their schedule, you know, they still have some teams to play that are going to provide them some potential fits. And when we take a look at everything with Galena, you know, they still have to play Dupac and East Dubuque. EPC and Dakota are in there in these next 2 weeks, which should be wins for Galena. Dupac is going to be a tough one for Galena to play. And then East Dubuque is a rivalry game. And right now, obviously, East Dubuque is hurting from some injuries, but you never know what's going to happen when we take a look at those matchups. But I think right now you're looking at Galena being in the playoffs with a 5 and 4 record.
Fulton took a huge loss to Lena Winslow this last week. How does their remaining schedule look, and what do you think? Where do you think they'll end up in the playoff outlook?
Well, Fulton's got a good amount of scheduling left as well. They have Stockton coming up, Forreston. And then they finish with EPC and Dakota. So really, the next 2 weeks are going to be critical for Fulton and where they're going to land in their playoff positioning. Right now, the way I see it, Stockton's going to present a viable threat for them. Depending on how they can take that game is going to determine, you know, how we look at them going into Week 7 with that matchup with Forreston. I honestly feel that right now Fulton would be looking at a 6 and 3 record. I think that they're going to lose to Forreston in Week 7. They'll beat Stockton in Week 6, but then they'll have EPC and Dakota as tune-up games, so to speak, going into the playoffs.
So obviously we've talked the whole time about the NUIC. Who outside of the NUIC do you expect to make some noise?
That's a good question. There are a few teams that I'm definitely looking at that could end up both in either the North or South brackets, for that matter, of Class 1A. And right now I'm looking at Abingdon Avon, which is 5-0 on the year. They just beat Ridge Farm 54-0. No, I'm sorry. They just beat Anawan Weathersfield 36-12. And obviously we know where Anawan Weathersfield's been in the playoffs the last couple of years, being either in 2A or in Class 1A. So I think they're a team to definitely look at. Obviously they moved into the Lincoln Trail Conference this year, so that's a conference that has a Stark County, Princeville, Anawan Weathersfield, all perennial playoff teams on a regular basis. Obviously Stark County lost their run here a few years ago and haven't been back since, but still a pretty decent conference there as far as 1A football is concerned. Toledo Cumberland is another team I'm looking at down south. Right now, the Pirates are 4-1. They beat Villa Grove 47-8 this past week. And I think that in the South bracket, they could definitely make some noise and potentially be one of the favorites coming out of the South to make it to DeKalb. Peru St. Bede out of the Three Rivers Conference is another one I'm looking at. Obviously, they're 4-1. They just beat Riverdale 34-21, and their only losses to Kewanee so far on the year, which Kewanee is a 4A school that could possibly jump into Class 3A, and we'll talk about that later. But then we have Central A&M and GCMS. Obviously, GCMS was the Class 2A state champs in 2017 and 18. They're going to be in Class 1A this year. And then Central A&M was at state here in 2019. Both those two teams did take losses this past week. Central A&M losing to Tuscola. And GCMS took a loss to Eureka. So I know that GCMS is suffering from some injuries right now. Don't know if they'll get those starters back, but they're still a team that I'm definitely looking forward to if they get back to full health. And then likewise, Central A&M coming out of the South, you know, it's hard to see it, but the 1A South just is not at the same competitive level as the 1A North, and I know people get tired of hearing that, but unfortunately it's the truth, and we see it on a regular basis with the teams that they have to play compared to what we see up here in the North. So, but that gives you a look at what I see as teams to watch out for in Class 1A. Overall, that's our overview on Class 1A in general, and what we expect to see as we move forward and count down the weeks to our playoff show. All right, we take a look at Class 2A here. Obviously, we don't have any NUIC teams that we're taking a look at, but we continue to follow Class 2A anyhow, as we have a lot of interest in Class 2A, especially if one of our teams, the Dupac Rivermen, happen to make their way into the Class 2A field, which right now looks like it's an outside thing, but it could become a potential possibility. So we'll take a look at Class 2A and see what we have here.
I know you mentioned this in the 1A segment, but there's been a lot of talk about Immaculate Conception lately. And do you think they're going to be 1A? Are they going to be 2A? Or will they bounce up to 4A?
Well, some of that confusion lied in the fact that when the IHSA brought out the original playoff outlook, there was an asterisk next to Immaculate Conception, which the asterisk had a denotation stating that they had opted to play up, and the IHSA had Immaculate Conception in the 4A outlook. We have received word from several people across the state associated with IHSA that have stated that Immaculate Conception has not elected to play in the Class 4A, which means that they will play at their enrollment level of 323. So right now that effectively puts them into Class 2A, but like we stated in our Class 1A segment, if that cut line continues to rise, we could potentially see Immaculate Conception drop another class yet into Class 1A.
There's 8 undefeated teams remaining in Class 2A. Who do you think has the best chance to be in DeKalb?
I think in the South bracket, we definitely see either Decatur, St. Teresa, or Breeze Mater Dei. Those two teams appear at the current moment to be on a collision course with each other. Obviously, there's some other teams that are going to have a say in that, with Pana and Bismarck-Henning both being undefeated teams. Both appear to be on pace to finish at 9-0 as well. And then you got to take a look at some other teams as well. You still have Maroa Forsyth in there. They just lost this past week by a touchdown to the defending 3A state champion Williamsville. So there's that spectrum to look at. Tri-Valley, if they fall into the South bracket of Class 2A, they're going to be a team that will possibly, most likely, finish 9-0 as well. And they're running roughshod through the HOIC right now, which that conference has won 4 of our last 5 Class 2A state championships. So there's a lot to look forward to there. in that regard. Obviously, Maroa still has to match up with Athens yet, which Athens only has a loss also by a touchdown to Williamsville. So that'll be an interesting matchup too. But we could see Athens fall into 1A. Their enrollment's only at 316, so right now where the outlook has the cut would see Athens in Class 1A. I'm not sure that the cut line will actually get that high, but you never know. Like we stated, everything's got variables that are going to play into where everything shakes out over the next 4 weeks. So those are the teams I'm looking at, though, out of the South. In the North, obviously, Immaculate Conception is definitely going to be that team that you're expecting to see there. Teams that could potentially give them some runs could be Reed Custer or Knoxville, potentially. As both those teams appear to be very strong right now, play good schedules that could help get them to a level. But IC kind of plays at a different level than everybody else, so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
So obviously we have this reoccurring theme of who's going to be in what class. And I know one big-time player we normally see is Bishop McNamara. They have 3 losses, all coming to schools that are usually 4A, sometimes a little bit higher. How do you see them posing a threat to the playoff field?
Right now, you know, you take a look at where they're at. They're 2-3. They have some games coming up with Aurora Central Catholic, St. Francis, Immaculate Conception, and Riverside Brookfield. I think in reality they'll split those games and end up at 4-5. But if they could squeeze out a win against either St. Francis or IC, now you're looking at them at a 5-4 record and being in the playoff field, because I'm pretty sure at 5-4 they'll definitely make the playoffs. I think right now, even if they go 4-5, I don't think that they would make the cut for a 4-5 team getting in the playoffs, because you're looking at playoff points needing to be right now about 23 to 25 points to have a shot at being a 4-5, making that line, because I think those playoff point cutoffs are going to be up in the low 50s. And right now, Bishop McNamara is at 21 points. So I just don't think that it's going to work out for them unless they get that 5th win. But if they, by me taking a look at what they have left on their schedule, I just don't think Bishop McNamara is going to be a team that we have to worry about in Class 2A this year. Anyway, that gives us a look at what we have going on in Class 2A, and we'll start to head over to Class 3A. All right, in Class 3A, we got a lot of interesting things going on there. Obviously, 3A is a lot stronger than what we've seen in recent years prior to Immaculate Conception and Bishop McNamara dominating the Class 3A scene from 2015 to 2017. But what we do have is some good public schools that are there that we've come to know over the past few years. And then there's some other teams that have been building up that, you know, if you look at history throughout the course of time, they're starting to make a face for themselves, like the Tolono Unities, the Mount Carmels. They're starting to get their faces back in there, and we're starting to see some other teams jump up in there that we don't normally see on a regular basis, but they're putting forward some good schedules and results to help bring them into that spotlight. So Class 3 is going to be a lot of fun, I think.
This last Friday, DuPec had a close game, a close loss with #1 ranked St. Teresa, 2A ranked St. Teresa. How is this going to help DuPec?
Well, I take a look at a lot of things, and right now, if you take a look at Class 2A, that playoff field is looking to be a lot stronger than what the 3A field is. Now, I just got done saying that the 3A field is stronger than what we've seen in recent years, and it is. But the 2A field, um, based off of ratings, schedules, and etc., the 2A field is definitely deeper and stronger right now than 3A, and both those two are a lot deeper than everything considered 1A right now. So I think Dupec being able to play with St. Teresa, and St. Teresa being a favorite to be in DeKalb in Class 2A speaks volumes for where the Rivermen are at currently. Obviously, it also helped them expose some issues that the Rivermen need to work on and shore up in order to have a decent and effective run in the playoffs this year.
Will 5A, 6A, perennial powerhouse Lombard, Montini make the playoffs?
That's a good question. Obviously, right now they're sitting at 2 and 3. You take a look at their remaining 4 games, and they have Providence Catholic, they have Marist, they have Nazareth Academy, and they have Joliet Catholic. So at 2 and 3, they have to be able to pull off at least 3 wins there, and I don't think it's going to happen. I honestly feel that we're going to see Montini finish 2 and 7. Now, obviously, variables can happen that we've continued to talk about. Maybe something shows up for Montini that we haven't seen all year, and they upset one of these teams. But to do it 3 times against 3 teams that are regular playoff powers, just as much as Montini has been over the years, it's going to be very hard to do. So I don't think we have to worry about Montini in the 3A playoffs this year. Now, the only downside to that is we may see Montini in 3A a lot longer because of this as well.
What teams in the North do you expect to meet up with Dupec?
Well, teams in the North that we could expect to see are obviously Byron, Princeton. We can see Wilmington, and provided that they do fall into Class 3A, and I think they will, Kewanee. And right now, Kewanee is off of everybody's radar, but they are pounding the Three Rivers Conference left and right. They just took out Princeton, who was a huge favorite in Class 3A. They beat them 49-21 this past week. It was 28-21 at the half, and then they put up another 21 points in the second half to run away with that game. So the Boilermakers are definitely a team that people aren't necessarily watching, but they're coming quietly by making a lot of noise with the games that they played and how they've won them. I mean, they haven't just beat teams. I mean, they have literally destroyed teams, and it's interesting to see.
Doesn't sound so quiet to me. So that was the North. Who are you looking at in the South?
In the South right now, you can't count out Williamsville. Obviously, they're the defending state champ. They have 1 loss on the year, which is to a team out of the Milwaukee suburban area earlier this year, week 1 actually. Good competition for them. That would be like Williamsville going up and playing a 6A, 7A team here in the state of Illinois. So you kind of expect those games to go in the direction of the bigger school, and in Williamsville's case it did, but not a big deal. They're still a very formidable team. Coach Coons down there does a great job. Another team definitely taking a look at is Mount Carmel. The Golden Aces are tearing up the Little Illini Conference, which is a conference they just recently joined, especially after all the talks of teams needing to go to districts and whatnot. They knew that they needed to come back into Illinois and jump into the conference. The Little Illini was there saying, hey, Mount Carmel, come join us. So they have, and they're definitely a team I'm looking at. Benton, the Rangers are 5-0 right now, and they're winning some big games down there in the Southern Illinois River to River Conference, and I think they're a team to watch for, one that I'm definitely keeping my eye on. And then, of course, Tolono Unity and Monticello are 2 other teams that I'm definitely seen as potential candidates to get to DeKalb in Class 3A out of the South bracket. So that gives you a look at what we see Class 1A, 2A, 3A, and 8-man as far as our mid-season review. We have a lot of things to take a look at in the coming weeks. I'm excited that we get to start seeing more playoff outlooks start to take place, especially now that they're starting to become more true to light as you start seeing teams that you know will not qualify for the playoffs start to fall out of that picture. It brings things to more clarity. So it's always fun to see. Try to get an idea of where playoff points are going to be at, where that cut line's going to be at, how many 4 and 5 teams are going to get in. If they do, can we just keep it to a 5 and 4 field? Time will soon tell, but this is what the last 4 weeks of the regular season is. It's just a race to the finish line, and we're getting there.
What's funny is, I know at every point of the season you can go back and watch video after video after video, and we're always like, yeah, here we are, we're looking into playoffs. But I feel like this year more than ever, now that we have that big C word that we have to watch out for.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it just adds a whole nother thing. You talk about playoff points. If you're getting a forfeit, you're not getting any points, are you?
You still get you still get your playoff points.
Okay.
You still get the playoff points, so you just don't have a game played is all it is. So
okay.
One team's going to get the win, the other team's going to get the loss. But you're only going to get the playoff points for however many games that team wins. And typically what you're going to do is if you're out for COVID 1 week, you're going to be out for a second week.
Right.
So basically you could be losing an additional point that you would have got, or vice versa, 2 points in that case too.
So yeah, that just makes everything a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, it definitely plays a critical role in how we are going to be dicing things up here come the next couple of weeks. So it's an unfortunate factor that we have to live with. But that'll give us a wrap. Obviously, good 4 weeks ahead of us, so get out to the games. As always, root for the NUIC.